AITA for keeping the evidence after my wife served me divorce papers at our anniversary dinner? I'm Jacob, 41, and by the time of that dinner with Allison, I had already spent years mistaking silence for patience. We had been married long enough to own matching coffee mugs we never intentionally bought as a set. Long enough to know which side of the bed the other person would choose in a hotel. Long enough to have inside jokes that had stopped being funny, but we still said automatically. From the outside, we looked steady. We remembered birthdays. We showed up to family events together. We had the same Sunday routine we'd had for years. I made eggs, toast, and coffee while Allison sat at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. Near the end, I still made breakfast for two even when she barely looked up. I told myself effort counted. I told myself marriages went through cold seasons. I told myself that staying calm was the same as protecting us. What I didn't understand was that while I was trying not to make things worse, Allison was getting comfortable telling everyone I was the problem. It started small. At one of her parents' dinners, Marjorie asked us if we had any plans for the summer. Before I could answer, Allison laughed and said, "Jacob doesn't really do plans. He does routines." Warren smirked over his drink. "Nothing wrong with being predictable," he said. "Some people aren't built for much else." I looked at Allison, waiting for her to push back. She took a bite of salad and shrugged. "He's dependable. Not exciting, obviously, but dependable." Everyone laughed except me and Meredith, Allison's cousin by marriage, who looked down at her plate. On the drive home, I told Allison I didn't like being talked about as if I weren't in the room. "You're making it sound worse than it was," she said. "You called me boring in front of your whole family. I called you dependable. You added not exciting, obviously." She sighed and turned toward the passenger window. "This is what I mean. Everything hurts your feelings." That line became useful to her. Whenever I objected to something, I was being sensitive. Whenever I asked where she had been, I was being controlling. Whenever I wanted to talk about the distance between us, I was starting a fight. She could say something cruel, and if I reacted at all, my reaction became the bigger problem. Brett entered our marriage gradually. At first, he was just someone Allison knew through a professional networking group. She described him as funny, blunt, and the only person in the room who wasn't pretending. Then his name started appearing in ordinary conversations. Brett had recommended a restaurant. Brett thought people stayed in unhappy marriages because they were afraid of change. Brett said ambitious people needed partners who challenged them. Brett had sent her a podcast about outgrowing old versions of yourself. One night, Allison was smiling at her phone while I cleared our dinner plates. "Something funny?" I asked. "Just Brett." "What did Brett say?" Her smile disappeared. "Why?" "Because you laughed." "So now I have to report every conversation?" "No." I asked one question. She placed her phone face down. "Brett can have a conversation without turning it into a problem. Then maybe you should stop bringing him into conversations about our marriage." That earned me another long sigh. "You're jealous because he understands things you don't." I wanted to ask what, exactly, he understood. Instead, I carried the plates to the sink. That was my pattern. I noticed. I absorbed. I postponed. I thought restraint would lower the temperature. All it did was teach Allison that she could keep raising it. The night I finally suggested counseling came after another dinner with her parents. Warren had spent 20 minutes explaining that a husband was supposed to set the pace in a marriage, then asked Allison if she ever regretted settling down so early. Marjorie reached over and squeezed her hand. "She gave up a lot," she said softly. Allison stared at the table and let the silence answer for her. On the way home, I said, "We need help." She gave a small laugh. "You need help. We need someone neutral. A stranger with a certificate? Someone who can keep us from doing this in front of your family." "Doing what?" "Bleeding out in public." That got her attention. For a second, the anger dropped from her face, and I saw something tired underneath it. I booked an appointment the next morning. The confirmation came to both of us by email. The counselor's office asked us to complete separate intake forms and arrive 15 minutes early. 2 days before the appointment, Allison told me she had a conflict. I offered to reschedule. She said she would handle it. The appointment disappeared from our shared calendar that afternoon. When I asked about a new date, she told me she was still waiting to hear back. I believed her. A week later, Marjorie called me. I heard you refused counseling, she said. I was standing in the kitchen with a coffee mug in my hand. What? Allison finally asked you to work on the marriage, and you refused. That's not what happened. Jacob, she is trying. You cannot keep punishing her because you're unhappy with yourself. I almost laughed because the claim was so cleanly reversed. Instead, I said, who told you that? You know who. When Allison got home, I asked why her mother believed I had refused counseling. She dropped her bag on a chair and rubbed her forehead. I don't know. She probably misunderstood. Did you tell her I refused? I told her it wasn't happening. You canceled it. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Interrogating me until I say something you can use against me. I stood there for several seconds. Then I said, did you cancel the appointment? She walked past me. I'm not having this conversation while you're like this. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't blocking her path. I wasn't even moving. But, while you're like this, made it sound as if I were. That was the first moment I realized she wasn't merely avoiding difficult conversations. She was practicing a version of me. A few weeks later, our anniversary was coming up. By then, things were strained enough that I assumed we would ignore it or exchange polite cards and sleep on opposite sides of the bed. Instead, Allison surprised me. My parents want to have dinner, she said one evening. For our anniversary. I looked up from the mail. Your parents. And a few relatives. That sounds less like an anniversary and more like a hearing. She folded her arms. Can we just be adults for one night? Adults usually talk before they invite an audience. They want to reset the tone. Everyone knows things have been awkward. Everyone knows because you tell them. Her expression tightened, but then she softened it so quickly that I could see the effort. I'm tired, Jacob. I don't want another fight. I want one calm dinner where nobody has to wonder what's happening with us. That sentence was carefully built. Nobody has to wonder. I should have asked why anyone outside our marriage needed an answer at our anniversary dinner. But part of me still wanted a calm ending, even if the marriage itself couldn't be saved. I thought maybe Allison planned to tell her family we were separating and wanted us to present a united front. So I agreed. 3 days before the dinner, I found the email. We had a printer in a small room off the hallway. It was old enough to make grinding noises before it printed anything, and we both used it for bills, forms, and anything that needed a signature. I went in to print an insurance document. There were already 2 pages in the output tray. The first was an online order confirmation. The second was part of an email chain between Allison and Marjorie. I wasn't searching her account. I didn't know her password. The page was sitting face up in the shared printer we both used. At the top, Marjorie had written, "Are you sure doing this at dinner is wise?" Allison's reply was underneath. "It needs to happen with everyone there. If he blows up in front of everyone, Nina won't be able to ignore it. Dad said he'll make sure Jacob understands he has no support. I just need him emotional enough to show what I've been dealing with." I read it twice, then a third time. My first thought was not about the divorce. It was, who is Nina? My second thought was, Allison expects me to blow up. My third was colder. She needs witnesses. I took a picture of the printed page right where it sat, including the printer tray and the timestamp visible on the email. Then I placed the page in a clear sleeve and put it in the small lockbox where we kept tax documents and passports. After that, I sat on the edge of the guest room bed for almost an hour. I didn't confront her. That surprised me. For years, I had imagined that if I ever found proof of a major betrayal, my body would take over. I would shout. I would demand answers. I would slam a door. Instead, I felt strangely alert. Allison had told her mother she wanted me emotional enough to show what she had been dealing with. That meant any confrontation I started would become part of her story. So I did something I should have done much earlier. I called my sister. Elise answered on the second ring. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "Why do you think something happened?" "Because you only call in the middle of a weekday when something has happened." I told her about the email. For once, she didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Send me a copy. I need to know what I'm legally allowed to do first." "Jacob, she is setting you up in your own marriage." "I know." "You don't sound angry." "I am." "No, you sound like you're discussing a water bill." "That's probably safer." She exhaled hard. "You've protected her for years. Stop protecting people who use your silence as permission." I called Connor next. He had watched my marriage deteriorate from the outside and had lost patience with my belief that calmness could solve everything. Do not confront her, he said. That was my instinct. Good. Save the email. Save anything you already have lawful access to. Don't guess. Don't threaten. Don't move money around because you're angry. I'm not angry enough to be stupid. You're hurt enough to be stupid. That's close. He gave me the name of a family attorney he trusted. Her name was Nina. That answered my first question. Apparently, Allison had already met with her. I called Nina's office and said I believed my wife might be preparing to serve me at a family dinner and provoke a reaction. The receptionist went quiet for half a second. Then she found an opening for the next morning. That evening, I checked only what I was authorized to access. I opened our joint bank account. A large transfer had been made 9 days earlier to an account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. It was not enough to empty the account, but it was enough to cover several months of rent somewhere modest, plus a deposit and moving expenses. I downloaded the monthly statements. I checked the counseling confirmation in my email. Buried in the thread was a cancellation notice sent to both of us. Allison had canceled the appointment herself 6 minutes after telling me she would handle it. I saved the message. I checked our shared doorbell camera history because I remembered a notification from a day I had been away helping Elise with a repair. Brett had arrived at our house at 2:17 p.m. He left 28 minutes later. There was nothing illegal about him standing at the front door. The camera didn't show what happened inside, but it contradicted Allison's repeated claim that Brett had never been to our home. The next morning, Warren left me a voicemail. His timing was almost too perfect. Jacob, this is Warren. I'm calling as a courtesy. Allison has given you enough chances to act like a man and handle this privately. A smart man would walk away quietly with what little respect he has left. If you embarrass her at dinner, this family will make sure people understand exactly why she had to leave. Think carefully. I listened once, then forwarded the audio file to myself and wrote down the timestamp. At Nina's office, I expected polished furniture, a dramatic speech, maybe some version of "we're going to destroy them." Instead, Nina wore reading glasses low on her nose, drank lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, and told me to stop thinking about the dinner as the main event. The dinner is theater, she said. The divorce is the legal process. Do not confuse the two. I showed her the printed email, the bank statements, the counseling cancellation, the doorbell clip, and Warren's voicemail. She reviewed each item without much visible reaction. When she reached the email, she looked up. She used my name as though I represent her. Do you? No. She consulted with my office and did not retain us. That creates a conflict, so I cannot represent you in the divorce. My stomach dropped. Then she continued. But I can tell you the immediate steps you should take, and I can refer you to someone excellent. So she already talked to you? Yes. She wanted to know how certain behavior might affect negotiations. What behavior? Nina took off her glasses. I cannot disclose the substance of a consultation. What I can tell you is that you should not provide anyone with a public outburst, threats, property damage, financial retaliation, or an impulsive departure from the shared home. I wasn't planning any of that. Most people don't plan it. They are provoked into it. She tapped the printed email. Do not give her the scene she is trying to buy with your anger. Then I'll give her the facts. Carefully. Nina referred me to another attorney, Daniel, who could represent me without the conflict. Nina also explained what not to do. I could move my own separate funds into an account in my name, but I should not drain joint accounts. I could preserve statements from accounts I was authorized to access, but I should not enter Allison's private accounts. I should not leave the shared home just because Allison or Warren demanded it. I should avoid private verbal conversations after service if I believed my words would be distorted. I should acknowledge receipt of legal papers if appropriate, but sign nothing resembling a settlement without counsel. The goal is not to win the dinner, Nina said. The goal is to avoid losing the divorce. That became the sentence I repeated to myself. Over the next 2 days, I opened a separate checking account and redirected only the income and funds that were legally mine to redirect after receiving advice. I did not touch the remaining joint balance. Daniel sent Allison's attorney a notice requesting preservation of financial records and a full accounting of recent transfers. I canceled voluntary payments I had been making for things connected to Allison's family, including a recurring contribution toward a family vacation account and a storage unit Warren used but had never paid for himself. I updated passwords on my personal email and financial accounts. I printed a small number of documents for the dinner. Not a thick folder. Not a dramatic binder. Just enough. The email page. The counseling cancellation. A bank statement showing the transfer. A transcript of Warren's voicemail with the date and time. 2 screenshots of messages Allison had accidentally sent to me in a conversation thread where Brett was discussed. One said, "You need to stop treating him like he has a vote in what comes next." The other, from Allison, said, "After Friday, he won't." I also printed a still image from the doorbell camera showing Brett at our front door. None of it proved every suspicion I had. It didn't need to. It proved that Allison's public story was planned. Elise came over the afternoon before the dinner. She stood in the kitchen while I made coffee and stared at the documents on the counter. "You're really going to sit through it?" she asked. "Yes." "Knowing what they're planning?" "I'm going to sit through it knowing what I'm not giving them. What if Warren gets in your face?" "I leave." "What if Allison cries?" "She probably will." "What if she says you're abusing her by showing people private information?" "I'm only showing documents related to the claims she's making in this room." Elise leaned against the counter. "I want to call her." "No." "I want to call her mother." "No." "I want to tell Warren exactly what kind of man threatened someone in a voicemail." "No." She looked at me for a long moment. "You always say no when people try to protect you. This time I'm saying no because I have a plan." That seemed to settle her. Connor was less emotional. He called before I left for dinner. Voice low, he said, "I know." Hands visible. "I'm not being arrested. You're entering a room where half the people have already agreed on the story. That's fair. Don't drink." "I wasn't planning to. Read every page before you sign anything." "I will. And when the moment comes, don't explain too much. Facts get weaker when people bury them under speeches." That advice probably saved me from turning the night into a performance of my own. The dinner was held in Allison's parents' formal dining room. They had assigned seats. That detail told me more than anything else. My chair was at the far end of the table, opposite Allison. Warren sat at her right. Marjorie sat at her left. Meredith and her husband were halfway down, along with 2 of Allison's aunts and an older family friend. There were champagne glasses at every place setting. A bottle chilled in a silver bucket near Warren. Dessert had already been ordered from Allison's favorite bakery and was waiting in the kitchen. Everything had been arranged to look celebratory. Allison wore the dress she had worn to our anniversary dinner 3 years earlier, back when we still held hands walking into restaurants. She greeted me with a brief kiss near my cheek. "You came," she said. "You invited me." "I wasn't sure you would." "Why wouldn't I?" Her eyes searched my face. For anger, maybe. For fear. Whatever she wanted, she didn't find it. Warren was unusually friendly. "Drink?" he asked. "No, thanks." "Come on. Special occasion." "I'm driving." He gave a little laugh. Always responsible. The way he said it turned the word into an insult. Dinner started with forced politeness. Marjorie talked about a neighbor's renovation. One of the aunts asked if we had any travel plans. Allison answered for both of us. "We're making some changes." Warren smiled into his glass. Meredith glanced at me. I took a bite of food and said nothing. Allison kept watching my hands. Not my face. My hands. I realized she was waiting for some sign of tension, a clenched fist, a shaking fork, a glass held too tightly. So I set my utensils down whenever I wasn't using them. Halfway through the meal, Marjorie raised her glass. Tonight is about everyone finally being honest. I looked at her. That would be new. The table shifted. Not much. Just enough. Allison's eyes sharpened. Warren leaned back in his chair as though the show had finally started. After the plates were cleared, Marjorie asked everyone to stay seated for dessert. Allison stood. She had rehearsed. I could hear it in the pacing of her words. "I know this is supposed to be an anniversary dinner," she began. "But anniversaries are also moments when you look honestly at what a relationship has become." Nobody interrupted. I have spent years shrinking myself to keep this marriage comfortable for Jacob. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to communicate. I've tried to get us help. I watched Marjorie nod at that last part. Allison continued. But I can't keep apologizing for wanting more from my life. She walked to the sideboard, picked up a large white envelope, and placed it beside my dessert fork. Not thrown. Not slammed. Placed carefully. Like a prop landing on its mark. I filed for divorce, she said. Tonight, I'm choosing myself. And eventually, I'm choosing a man who doesn't embarrass me. There it was. A man. Not a life. Not peace. A man. Warren reached for the champagne bottle. About time this family upgraded, he said. A few people gave uncomfortable laughs. Marjorie touched Allison's arm. She gave you years she'll never get back, Jacob. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I opened the envelope. The first pages were the petition and service documents. Behind them was an acknowledgement of receipt. Then came proposed temporary terms and financial requests. I read slowly. Allison became impatient. You don't need to study it right now. I'm reading what you put in front of me. It's standard. Then waiting 30 seconds shouldn't matter. Warren clicked his tongue. Don't play games. I ignored him. I signed only the acknowledgement confirming that I had received the documents. I wrote the date and time. I did not sign the proposed terms. Then I placed the pen beside my plate. Allison stared at me. That's it, she asked. What were you expecting? I expected you to understand what this means. I do. Her voice rose slightly. Then say something. That was the bait. Not subtle anymore. She needed the reaction. I looked at her, then at the people around the table. I'm not fighting the divorce, I said. I'm fighting the lie you built around it. Warren laughed. There he goes. Marjorie leaned toward Allison. Don't engage. Allison's face changed. The polished sadness slipped. What lie? I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and took out the printed email. This one. I placed it on the table, facing Meredith and the people nearest me. Allison froze. Marjorie's mouth opened slightly. Warren stopped smiling. I read one sentence aloud. If he blows up in front of everyone, Nina won't be able to ignore it. Allison recovered quickly. You went through my email? No. You printed it on our shared printer and left it in the tray. That doesn't give you the right to humiliate me. I looked at the divorce papers beside my plate. You invited everyone to watch me lose. I'm only showing them what game you were playing. Warren pushed his chair back. This is exactly the kind of unstable behavior Allison warned us about. I took out the transcript of his voicemail. You called me Tuesday at 8:14 a.m. His face darkened. I read his words without changing my tone. A smart man would walk away quietly with what little respect he has left. If you embarrass her at dinner, this family will make sure people understand exactly why she had to leave. One of the aunts looked at Warren. You said that. He's twisting it. It's a voicemail, I said. The audio exists. Warren pointed at me. You should have kept family matters private. Meredith spoke for the first time. Warren, this is a family dinner with divorce papers at the table. Nobody answered her. I placed the counseling confirmation and cancellation email beside the first page. Allison told people I refused counseling. I booked the appointment. She canceled it. Marjorie's eyes moved over the date. Allison said you wouldn't go. I asked to reschedule. Allison folded her arms. Because by then it was pointless. That isn't what you told them. I was trying to protect my parents from the details. By making up different details? Her eyes filled with tears. It happened fast enough that I wondered if she had practiced that too. You don't know what it was like living with you, she said. That may be true. The room shifted again. She hadn't expected agreement. I continued. I'm sure I was difficult in ways I didn't see. I avoided arguments. I let resentment sit too long. I should have drawn boundaries years ago. None of that explains this. I placed the bank statement down. A large transfer left our joint account 9 days ago. That money is mine too. Yes, which is why my attorney requested an accounting instead of accusing you of theft. The word attorney changed the room. Warren sat forward. You hired a lawyer before tonight. I got legal advice after I found the plan. Allison's tears stopped. You planned this. No, you planned this. I prepared for it. She picked up the bank statement and scanned it. You have no idea what that money was for. I know part of it matched a lease deposit. Her head snapped up. That information came from a payment description on the joint statement, not from any private account. Brett's last name wasn't listed, but the property management company was. I placed the doorbell still beside it. And I know Brett was at our house on the afternoon you told me you were meeting your mother. Allison looked at the image. He dropped something off. You told me he had never been inside our home. He wasn't inside. He stayed 28 minutes. So now you track how long people stand at the door? The camera sends timestamps. We both use it. Warren stood. That's enough. I remained seated. No, this is the part you invited me here for. He put both hands on the table. You are embarrassing my daughter. She chose the audience. Get out of my house. I'll leave when I'm finished receiving the papers your daughter arranged to serve here. Marjorie said my name in the tone people use when they want to make calmness sound threatening. Jacob, stop. I looked at her. You helped plan this because you believed Allison needed protection. I understand that. But did you know she canceled counseling and told you I refused? Marjorie didn't answer. Did you know about the transfer? Still nothing. Did you know Brett had been at our house? Her eyes moved toward Allison. That was the first visible crack in the alliance. Allison turned to her. Mom, don't. Meredith reached for the email page and read it herself. Then she looked at Allison. Is any of this not true? Allison's face hardened. That's not the point. Meredith held the page still. It is exactly the point. You don't know what he's like. I'm not saying I do. Then stay out of it. You invited me. Allison looked around the table and realized she no longer controlled where anyone was looking. They weren't watching me. They were watching her answer. She pressed both hands to the edge of the table. I had to protect myself. From what? Meredith asked. From the way he manipulates everything. I almost smiled at the irony, but didn't. Meredith asked, did he refuse counseling? Allison looked away. Counseling wouldn't have fixed it. That wasn't the question. Warren cut in. My daughter doesn't owe anyone an interrogation. No, I said. She owes me a financial accounting. The rest is voluntary. Allison turned on me. This is exactly why I'm leaving. You care more about winning than about what you did to me. I'm not trying to win the marriage. Then why bring all this? Because you were about to tell a room full of people that I refused help, controlled you, mishandled money, and became unstable when confronted. You wanted witnesses. Now you have them. Her phone lit up on the table. The screen was facing Meredith. Allison reached for it too late. Meredith saw the message preview. So did Marjorie. So did I? Brett, is the show over yet? For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then I said, that answers the friendship question. Allison grabbed the phone and stood. You don't know what that means. Warren looked at the screen as if he could force the message into being less obvious. Marjorie whispered, Allison. It was a joke, Allison said. Meredith shook her head. No, a joke would make sense after you explain it. Allison's breathing became shallow. He knew I was telling Jacob tonight. He called it a show, I said, because he knew how dramatic Jacob would make it. I gestured to the table. I'm sitting down. Warren came around the side of the table. Connor's advice went through my head. Voice low, hands visible. Leave if Warren gets in your face. I put both hands flat on the table and stood slowly. Warren stopped a few feet away. You think a few papers make you clever? No. You've been a disappointment to her for years. That may be what she believes. You never gave her the life she deserved. That may be what you believe. His face reddened because I wasn't giving him anything to push against. He wanted an argument with heat. I gave him flat surfaces. Then I looked at Allison. From this point on, you can talk to my attorney or write it in an email. She laughed once, sharply. You're really going to hide behind a lawyer? I'm going to communicate in a way that can't be rewritten later. You're leaving tonight. No, I'm returning to the shared home. My attorney advised me not to leave impulsively. That house is mine. It's ours until a court or agreement says otherwise. Warren stepped closer. You heard her. I looked at him. And you heard your own voicemail. That stopped him. I gathered my copies of the documents. I left the evidence pages on the table because everyone had already seen them and I had the originals stored safely. I did not touch the champagne. I did not raise my voice. I did not eat the anniversary cake. As I reached the doorway, Marjorie called after me. Jacob. I turned. Her expression was no longer triumphant. It wasn't apologetic either. She looked confused, like someone who had opened a door expecting one room and found another. Did you ever love her? She asked. The question was unfair enough that I almost ignored it. Yes, I said. That's why I spent so long making excuses for how she treated me. Allison looked away. I left. In the car, my hands finally started shaking. Not at the table. Not when the papers came out. Not when Warren stood over me. Only after the door closed and I was alone. I sat in the driveway for 5 minutes without starting the engine. Then I called Elise. Are you safe? She asked. Yes. Did it happen? Yes. Did you lose your temper? No. Did they? Yes. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. What did Allison say? Mostly that the facts weren't the point. That means the facts were bad. I drove home. Allison didn't return that night. At 11:38 p.m., she sent me a text. You humiliated me in front of my entire family. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Daniel. Then I replied by email. I acknowledge your message. Please direct divorce-related communication through counsel. For household logistics, email is fine. She called 6 times. I did not answer. The next morning, she came home with Marjorie. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Marjorie stood near the doorway while Allison walked in quickly and held up her phone. You blocked me. I didn't block you. You're not answering. That isn't the same thing. You made my father look abusive. He left the voicemail. You made Brett look like we were having an affair. You told everyone you were choosing a man who didn't embarrass you. Then he texted asking if the show was over. Marjorie flinched. Allison glanced at her. Can we talk privately? No. Her face tightened. This is our marriage. You made it public. I was emotional. You were rehearsed. She stepped closer. Jacob, I need you to listen to me. I'll read anything you send. You're being impossible. I'm being careful. Marjorie finally spoke. Allison, maybe we should go. Allison turned on her. You said he would cave. There it was. Marjorie's face changed. I said he would understand. You said Dad would handle him. I didn't know about Brett. You knew enough. Marjorie looked at me, embarrassed and defensive at the same time. We thought a clean break would be better. For Allison. She was unhappy. She was allowed to leave. That's easy to say now. It was easy to say before. I never threatened to stop her. Allison dropped her phone into her bag. You would have dragged this out. By asking questions? By making me feel guilty. You transferred money, canceled counseling, told people I refused, invited witnesses, and planned to provoke me. You weren't afraid I'd drag it out. You were afraid I'd tell the truth before you finished telling your version. She stared at me. Then she said quietly, Brett understands me. Marjorie closed her eyes. I nodded. Then this divorce should be a relief. That was the first time Allison looked genuinely uncertain. Not because I had exposed her. Because I wasn't asking her to stay. She had built the entire night around my collapse. Anger, begging, humiliation, something that would prove she still had emotional control over me. My acceptance left her with only the practical consequences of what she had done. She and Marjorie left 20 minutes later. Over the next several weeks, the divorce stopped being theater and became paperwork. That was where Allison struggled. Daniel requested statements, transfer records, tax documents, insurance information, and an explanation for money moved from the joint account. Allison's attorney responded that the transfer was for anticipated separate living expenses. Daniel's answer was simple. Moving money was not automatically illegal, but the funds still had to be disclosed and accounted for. The money did not vanish just because she moved it before serving you, he told me. We reviewed recurring payments, joint debts, automatic drafts, beneficiary designations, and household expenses. I learned how many parts of a marriage continue operating after trust has ended. Insurance forms still list names. Tax records still show shared obligations. Subscriptions renew. Bills arrive. The refrigerator still contains food the other person bought. For a while, Allison stayed with her parents. Then she signed a lease. The deposit came from the transferred funds, exactly as the statement suggested. Brett did not move in with her. According to Meredith, he began creating distance once attorneys started asking about the timeline of the relationship and the use of joint money. He told Allison he didn't want to be dragged into legal conflict. That was consistent with what I had sensed about him. He liked being the upgrade while I was still the husband absorbing the cost. He liked secret texts and private confidence. He did not like signed declarations, financial questions, or the possibility that his messages might be discussed in a legal setting. Allison sent me a long email insisting that Brett had only been emotional support until after she decided to leave. I forwarded it to Daniel without responding. Later, Brett claimed he didn't know she was using his name like that. I believed he didn't know the full plan. I also believed he knew enough to text, "Is the show over yet?" Both things could be true. Warren never apologized. He sent one email accusing me of weaponizing private family communication. Daniel advised me not to engage. Marjorie did apologize, but not all at once. Her first message said, "I'm sorry dinner became so unpleasant." I did not answer. Her second came 4 days later. "I should not have repeated what Allison told me about counseling without asking you." I replied with one sentence. "Thank you for acknowledging that." Two of Allison's aunts sent polite messages saying they wished they had understood the situation before attending. Neither said they were on my side. That was fine. I didn't need a courtroom full of converts. Meredith called me once. "I want you to know I'm not pretending I understand your marriage," she said. "I know. But what happened at that dinner was cruel." "Yes." And the answer mattered. What answer? When I asked if the evidence was false, I leaned back in my chair. "Thank you for asking. I should have asked sooner." "So should I." The divorce itself took months, not days. There was no magical hearing where a judge declared me completely right and Allison completely wrong. There were negotiations. There were disclosures. There were arguments over dates, payments, personal property, and what counted as shared. Some of the transferred money was credited in the financial settlement. Some expenses were treated as ordinary separation costs. Neither of us got everything we wanted. That was reality. What mattered was that Allison's early attempt to define me as unstable did not become an uncontested fact. The counseling records existed. The email existed. Warren's voicemail existed. The financial timeline existed. My behavior at the dinner existed. I had not threatened anyone. I had not destroyed anything. I had not emptied accounts. I had not abandoned the home. I had not given them the man they came prepared to describe. About 2 months into the process, Allison asked to meet privately. She said attorneys were making everything hostile. I declined. She asked again, saying she wanted closure. I told her closure could be written in an email. Her reply came late that night. "You always were cold when it mattered." I stared at the sentence for a while. Then I wrote back. "I was not cold. I was quiet. There is a difference. I will not have another private conversation that can be retold later." She did not respond. The house felt strange after she moved out. For years, I had shaped my movements around her moods without admitting it. I knew which cabinet doors annoyed her if they closed too loudly. I knew when not to ask questions. I knew how long to wait before following up after an argument. When she was gone, I kept moving carefully for a while. Then one morning I dropped a spoon into the sink and realized I was bracing for a reaction that wasn't coming. I stood there looking at the spoon. That moment affected me more than signing the divorce papers. Not because I missed her. Because I understood how much of my daily life had been spent anticipating judgment. I started seeing a therapist on my own. Not to save the marriage. Not to prove anything. I wanted to understand why I had treated avoidance as maturity. The answer was not dramatic. I hated conflict. I was afraid that boundaries would make people leave. So I accepted disrespect in small pieces, then congratulated myself for being reasonable. Connor called that paying interest on peace. Elise called it worse things. Both were right. The final settlement required Allison to account for the transferred funds, divide the remaining assets, refinance certain obligations in her name, and release claims that had no support. We each kept our own separate property. We sold some shared items and divided the proceeds. I removed her from insurance benefits where legally permitted after the divorce became final and updated the beneficiaries on my accounts. The paperwork was ordinary. The emotional shift wasn't. At the final meeting, Allison sat across from me with her attorney. She looked tired. Not ruined. Not defeated. Just tired. I was glad. I had never wanted revenge in the form of destroying her life. I wanted the lies to stop costing me mine. Before we left, she said, "You could have handled dinner differently." Her attorney looked at her, but didn't interrupt. I said, "So could you? You knew what was coming. Part of it. And you let me do it. You were allowed to file for divorce." "That's not what I mean." "I know." She looked down at the signed documents. "I thought you'd fight for me." The sentence was so honest that neither of us moved for a moment. "You wanted me to fight for you in front of people you invited to humiliate me?" "I wanted to know you cared." "I booked counseling." "That wasn't the same." "I made breakfast for two for years while you were texting another man." Her expression tightened. "You think breakfast fixes everything?" "No. I think I kept offering small things because I was afraid to demand the big ones." She looked at me then. For once, there was no audience and no performance. "I was unhappy," she said. "I know. I felt trapped. You could have left without building a case against my character. I didn't think anyone would understand." "You didn't need everyone to understand. You needed a lawyer and an honest sentence." She looked away. "You make it sound simple." It wasn't simple. It was still necessary. Her attorney gathered the papers. The conversation ended there. The divorce became final without another scene. A few Sundays later, I woke up early out of habit. I went to the kitchen, took out the eggs, and automatically reached for 2 plates. Then I stopped. I put 1 plate back. I made breakfast for myself. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet from the silence inside my marriage. There was no phone face down on the counter. No insult waiting under a joke. No family opinion sitting between us like an extra person. Just coffee, toast, eggs, and sunlight across the floor. I did not beg Allison to stay. I did not ruin her new life. I did not become the angry man she had prepared everyone to see. I let her have the divorce, forced the finances into the open, and took back the part of the story she thought she owned. She planned a party for my downfall. I left with my signature, my evidence, and the one thing she thought she had taken from me, my dignity. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.